When the judge asked if I had anything to say before signing the divorce papers, I smiled and pulled out a folder that made my husband's face drain of all color. In that moment, watching him realize what I'd discovered, I felt 30 years of betrayal transform into the sweetest justice I'd ever known. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand just how completely he underestimated me. My name is Margaret, and for 30 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. I was 58 years old when everything fell apart. Though looking back now, I realize it had been crumbling for years. I just refused to see it. Robert and I met when we were both 28, fresh-faced and full of dreams. He was an ambitious accountant at a small firm, and I was working as a legal secretary at a law office downtown. We fell in love fast, got married within a year, and built what I thought was an unshakable partnership. I gave up my career when our daughter Emily was born 2 years into our marriage. Robert and I agreed that one of us should stay home, and since his career was taking off, it made sense for it to be me. I didn't mind. I loved being a mother, loved creating a warm home for my family. When our son Michael came along 3 years later, I threw myself even deeper into my role as wife and mother. I organized Robert's entire life, his dry cleaning, his business dinners, his mother's birthday presents, everything. I made sure he could focus solely on his career, and focus he did. Over the years, Robert climbed the corporate ladder at Thompson & Associates, eventually becoming a senior partner. We moved from our modest starter home to a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Maplewood Heights, the kind of neighborhood I'd only dreamed about as a child. Robert worked long hours, but I never complained. I understood that success required sacrifice, and I was proud of him. I was so proud of him. I poured my energy into our home and children. I volunteered at their schools, coached Emily's soccer team, drove Michael to piano lessons 3 times a week. I hosted elaborate dinner parties for Robert's colleagues, always making sure everything was perfect. The right wine, the right conversations, the right impression. Robert's boss, Martin Thompson, once told me that Robert's success was at least 50% due to having me as his wife. I glowed with pride at that comment. How naive I was. The children grew up and moved away. Emily became a doctor in Seattle, married a wonderful man named David, and gave us 2 beautiful grandchildren. Michael worked in software development in Austin, recently engaged to his girlfriend Sarah. I was so proud of them both, proud of the family we had built together. Robert and I had just begun talking about retirement, about traveling to all the places we never had time to visit, Italy, Greece, New Zealand. I had a Pinterest board full of dreams. Our 30th anniversary was approaching, and I'd been planning something special, nothing too extravagant. Robert always said he preferred intimate celebrations, but meaningful. I booked a bed and breakfast where we'd spend our honeymoon, made reservations at the restaurant where he proposed. I'd even had our wedding photos restored and put into a beautiful album. But about 6 months before our anniversary, I started noticing small changes. Robert became more distant, more distracted. He started going to the gym, something he'd never done in all our years together. He bought new clothes, younger styles that seemed out of character. He got a new hairstyle, started wearing cologne I didn't recognize. When I commented on these changes, he said he was just trying to take better care of himself, that his doctor had told him he needed to be more active. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. He started working even later than usual, coming home at 9 or 10 at night. Weekend golf games became all-day affairs. Business trips multiplied. When I tried to talk to him about spending more time together, he'd get irritated, say I was being clingy, that I needed to develop my own interests instead of hovering over him. That word hovering, it stung. I'd spent 30 years supporting him, and now I was hovering?
I tried to give him space, tried to develop those interests he mentioned. I joined a book club, started taking watercolor painting classes at the community center. I made friends with some of the other women my age, started having lunch dates and coffee meetups. My friend Susan, whose husband had left her 5 years earlier, kept giving me concerned looks when I talked about Robert's behavior, but I brushed off her worries. Robert would never do what Susan's husband had done. We were different. We were solid. Then came the night that changed everything.
It was a Tuesday in March, unseasonably warm. I'd made Robert's favorite dinner, pot roast with roasted vegetables, the recipe his mother had given me when we first got married. I'd set the table nicely, lit candles, opened a bottle of the red wine he liked. I thought maybe a nice dinner together, just the two of us, might help us reconnect. He came home at 7:30, which was actually early for him lately, but instead of seeming pleased about the dinner, he looked annoyed. He barely glanced at the table, loosened his tie, and poured himself a scotch instead of wine. I should have known then what was coming. "Margaret, we need to talk," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest, but I pushed it down. "Of course. I made your favorite dinner. Let's eat and talk." "No," he said firmly. "I need to talk now. Sit down." I sat at the dining room table, my hands clasped in my lap, waiting. Robert stood by the window, his back to me, that Scotch glass in his hand. The candles I had lit flickered between us. Romantic lighting for the worst moment of my life. "I want a divorce," he said, still not looking at me. Just like that. No preamble, no softening. 4 words that destroyed 30 years. I couldn't breathe, literally couldn't catch my breath. "What?" I finally managed. "Robert, what are you talking about? Is this a joke?" He turned then, and his face was so cold, so distant. This wasn't the man I'd married, wasn't the man who'd held my hand in the delivery room, who danced with me at our daughter's wedding. This was a stranger. "It's not a joke. I want a divorce. I'm not happy anymore, Margaret. I haven't been happy for years." "Years?" My voice broke. "What do you mean years? Why didn't you say something? We can go to counseling. We can work on this." "No," he interrupted. "I don't want to work on it. I want out. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be served with papers next week." He'd already spoken to a lawyer? He'd planned this, prepared for this while I was picking out restaurants for our anniversary weekend. "Is there someone else?" I asked, even though I was terrified of the answer. He had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second. "That's irrelevant. This is about us, about our marriage not working anymore." "That means yes," I said, my voice hollow. "There's someone else. Who is she?" "It doesn't matter." "Who is she?" I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "Her name is Amber. She works at the firm. She's understands me in ways you never could." Amber. I knew exactly who she was. I'd met her at the firm's Christmas party just 4 months ago. She was Robert's secretary. 28 years old, with long blonde hair and legs that went on forever. She'd been friendly to me, complimented my dress, asked me questions about our children. And all the while, she was sleeping with my husband. "How long?" I asked. "Margaret, how long, Robert?" "About 8 months." 8 months? While I was planning our anniversary, while I was making his dinners and doing his laundry and believing in us? "Do the children know?" "Not yet. I'll tell them this weekend." "You'll tell them," I repeated numbly. "You'll tell them you're leaving their mother for a woman young enough to be your daughter." "Don't be dramatic. Amber and I are in love. We're planning to get married once the divorce is final." Married? He was planning to marry her? "Get out," I whispered. "What?" "Get out of this house. Get out right now." "Margaret, be reasonable.
We need to discuss the logistics. Get out! I grabbed the nearest thing, a decorative bowl from the sideboard, and threw it. It shattered against the wall behind him. Get out of my house right now, or I swear to God, Robert, I will do something we'll both regret. He left. He actually looked frightened as he grabbed his keys and wallet and left. I heard his car start, heard him drive away, and then I collapsed on the floor next to the dining room table with its romantic candles and untouched pot roast and cried like I'd never cried in my entire life. I called Emily first. She was shocked, horrified, furious. She said she'd fly home immediately, but I told her no, to stay with her family. I called Michael next, and he said the same thing Emily had said. What was Dad thinking? How could he do this? I couldn't answer those questions. I didn't understand any of it. Then I called Susan, my friend from book club, and she came right over. She found me still on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and cold pot roast. She cleaned me up, cleaned up the mess, and stayed with me until 3 a.m, letting me cry and rage and try to make sense of the senseless. I gave him everything, I kept saying. I gave up my career, my dreams, everything. I built my entire life around him. I know, honey, I know. The next morning, I felt hollow, emptied out. I kept thinking it had been a nightmare, that I'd go downstairs and Robert would be reading the newspaper like always, that yesterday hadn't really happened. But his side of the bed was empty and cold, and when I went downstairs, the house was silent.
The divorce papers arrived the following Tuesday, delivered by a smug-looking process server who found me in my bathrobe, my hair unwashed, my eyes swollen from a week of crying. I read through them in a daze. Robert was asking for a quick divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. He was offering me a settlement, the house and half of his pension, plus $3,000 a month in alimony for 10 years. It seemed generous on the surface, but Susan's ex-husband was a divorce attorney, and when I showed her the papers, she immediately saw the problems. Margaret, this is insulting. You were married for 30 years. You gave up your career for him. You're entitled to far more than this. Half his pension? He has 3 pensions plus substantial retirement accounts. And $3,000 a month? That's nothing given his income. I don't want to fight, I said tiredly. I just want this to be over. No, Susan said firmly. You don't give up now. You get angry. You fight back. This man betrayed you and now he's trying to cheat you financially too. You get yourself the best divorce attorney in this city and you make him pay. Something in her words sparked a tiny flame of anger in my chest. She was right. Robert had betrayed me and now he was trying to take advantage of my grief to shortchange me. Well, I wasn't going to let him. Susan gave me the number of her ex-husband's former adversary, a woman named Patricia Donovan who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in divorce cases. I called her that afternoon. Patricia Donovan was in her late 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. When I met with her in her downtown office 2 days later, she listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Mrs. Harrison, she said when I finished, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your husband is trying to screw you over. This settlement he's offering is garbage. Based on what you've told me about his income, his assets, and the length of your marriage, you're entitled to significantly more. How much more? I asked. Let me do some digging first. I'll need access to your financial records, bank statements, tax returns, everything. Can you get me those? Yes, Robert always kept everything organized in his home office. Patricia's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Get me everything you can find, every document, every statement, every scrap of paper. And Mrs. Harrison, don't tell your husband what you're doing. The element of surprise is our greatest weapon. I spent the next week going through Robert's office. He'd moved into an apartment downtown, with Amber, I assumed, though I tried not to think about it. He came by once to get some clothes and belongings, and we barely spoke. He looked uncomfortable, guilty, but not guilty enough to change his mind. Once he left, I systematically went through every file cabinet, every drawer, every folder in his office. I photocopied everything. 30 years of tax returns, bank statements, investment accounts, pension documents. I found statements for accounts I didn't even know existed. I found credit card bills with charges at expensive restaurants and hotels, evidence of his affair that made my stomach turn. And then I found something else. Something that made me sit down hard in Robert's desk chair, my heart pounding. Hidden in the back of his bottom desk drawer, under a stack of old files, I found documents related to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, an account with over $850,000 in it, an account that didn't appear on any of our tax returns. Robert had been hiding money, a lot of money. I photocopied those documents with shaking hands and added them to the pile I was collecting for Patricia. But I kept digging, and I found more. I found documents showing that Robert had been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts to personal accounts I didn't have access to. I found evidence that he'd cashed out a life insurance policy we'd taken out years ago without telling me. I found emails he'd forgotten to log out of his computer, discussing his plans with Amber to buy a condo together using money he'd hidden from me. The more I found, the angrier I got. This wasn't just a man leaving his wife. This was a man who'd been planning his exit strategy for months, maybe longer, stealing from our marital assets to set up his new life with his mistress. He had calculated everything, anticipated everything, except that I'd fight back. I delivered everything to Patricia, and I watched her eyes widen as she went through the documents. "Oh, Margaret," she said with a predatory smile, "your husband is in so much trouble." "What do we do?" I asked. "We file a motion to freeze all marital assets immediately. We depose him under oath about these hidden accounts, and we prepare to take him apart in court." Are you ready for this? It's going to get ugly. I thought about 30 years of marriage, of sacrifice, of supporting a man who'd repaid me with betrayal and theft. "I'm ready," I said firmly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Patricia filed motions. Robert's lawyer, a slick guy named Dennis Cooper, filed countermotions. Robert was furious when he found out I'd hired an attorney, even more furious when his accounts were frozen. He called me, his voice tight with anger. "What the hell are you doing, Margaret? This is insane. I made you a fair offer." "A fair?" I laughed, actually laughed. "You call stealing nearly $1 million and hiding it in offshore accounts fair? You call systematically draining our joint assets fair?" Silence on the other end. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Cayman Islands account, Robert. I found it. I found everything." More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was different, scared. "Margaret, listen. We can work this out. You don't need to involve lawyers in courts. Let's be civilized about this." "Civilized? You want me to be civilized? You cheated on me for 8 months. You planned to leave me. You stole from me. And you want civilized? I'll make you a better offer." "No, I'll see you in court." I hung up on him. It felt amazing. As we prepared for the divorce hearing, more information came to light. Patricia deposed Robert, and under oath he had to admit to the offshore account. He had to admit to the transfers. He tried to claim the money was for investment purposes that he'd planned to tell me eventually, but Patricia shredded those excuses. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We also deposed Amber, which was particularly satisfying. She showed up in a tight dress and too much makeup, playing the innocent victim. But under Patricia's questioning, she fell apart. She admitted that Robert had told her he was going to leave me months before he actually did. She admitted that he'd bought her expensive gifts, jewelry, clothes, a car,
all while claiming he was being fiscally responsible and refusing to let me redecorate our bedroom. The hearing was scheduled for a Friday in June, 6 months after Robert had asked for a divorce. 6 months that felt like 6 years. I had lost weight, developed stress-induced insomnia, and found more gray hair than I knew what to do with. But I had also found something else. Strength, anger, determination. Emily flew in from Seattle, Michael from Austin. They both wanted to be there to support me. Susan came too, along with several other friends from book club. Patricia had prepared me extensively for what to expect, but nothing could really prepare me for seeing Robert walk into that courtroom with Amber on his arm. She was wearing a demure navy dress, probably trying to look respectable, but she still looked like a child playing dress-up. Robert, on the other hand, looked terrible. He'd lost weight too, but not in a healthy way. He looked haggard, stressed, older than his 58 years. Good. The hearing began with procedural matters, financial disclosures, testimony from both sides. Robert's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife, tried to claim that the offshore account was a legitimate business investment that I simply didn't understand. Patricia demolished those arguments, with documentation, with Robert's own emails, with testimony from the bank manager who'd helped him set up the account. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Helen Martinez, asked if I had anything to say before she made her ruling. I stood up, my heart pounding, and pulled out a folder. It was a folder Patricia and I had been saving, a folder containing the most damaging evidence we'd found. Robert's face went pale when he saw it. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I have additional information that I believe is relevant to this case." Judge Martinez nodded. "Proceed." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. "Your Honor, this is an email from my husband to Amber, dated 3 months before he asked me for a divorce. In it, he outlines his plan to hide assets before filing, specifically mentioning his intention to minimize Margaret's settlement and ensure that she doesn't take more than necessary." I handed the email to the bailiff to pass to the judge. Robert's lawyer jumped up, objecting, but Patricia had already filed these documents properly. They were admissible. "There's more, Your Honor," I continued. "This is a statement from the credit card company showing that my husband opened a credit card in my name without my knowledge or permission and charged over $45,000 on it, primarily at jewelry stores and luxury retailers, none of which I received. I believe these purchases were gifts for Amber." Gasps from the spectator section. Emily squeezed my hand. I kept going. "This is documentation showing that my husband forged my signature on a home equity loan application, taking out $200,000 against our house, a house that I believed was fully paid off. I never saw a penny of that money. I believe it went into his offshore account." Robert was on his feet now, his face red. "That's not... She's lying." "Mr. Harrison, sit down," Judge Martinez said sharply. She was looking at the documents with increasing anger. "And finally, Your Honor," I said, pulling out the last piece of evidence, "this is documentation from my husband's firm, Thompson and Associates, showing that he was officially warned 9 months ago about his relationship with Amber, his secretary, which violated the firm's fraternization policy. He was told to end the relationship or face termination. He didn't end it. Instead, he began planning to leave the firm, taking several key clients with him in violation of his non-compete clause. He'd planned to start his own firm with Amber as his partner, using money stolen from me to finance it." The courtroom exploded. Robert's lawyer was shouting objections. Robert himself looked like he might have a heart attack. Amber was crying. Judge Martinez banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order. I will have order in this courtroom." She glared at everyone, then focused on Robert. "Mr. Harrison, did you forge your wife's signature on a home equity loan?" Robert's lawyer tried to answer, but Judge Martinez cut him off. "I asked Mr. Harrison." Robert stood there trapped, his face ashen. "Yes, Your Honor, but I was going to tell her, did you open a credit card in her name without her knowledge or consent? I thought I believed. Yes or no, Mr. Harrison? Yes, quietly. Did you hide assets in an offshore account with the intention of preventing your wife from receiving her fair share in this divorce? Silence. Robert looked at his lawyer, who couldn't help him, looked at Amber, who was staring at the floor, looked at me, and I met his eyes with all the anger and betrayal I'd been carrying for 6 months. Yes, he finally said. Judge Martinez set down her gavel with deliberate care. Mr. Harrison, what you've done isn't just ethically reprehensible, it's criminal. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. I'm ordering these transcripts forwarded to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. Robert actually swayed on his feet. His lawyer grabbed his arm to steady him. As for the divorce settlement, Judge Martinez continued, I'm throwing out your proposed agreement entirely. Mrs. Harrison is entitled to full restitution for all stolen funds plus damages. She's entitled to 75% of all marital assets, including the house, investment accounts, and retirement funds. You, Mr. Harrison, will pay $8,000 per month in alimony for the duration of your ex-wife's life or until she remarries, whichever comes later. You will also be responsible for all legal fees, both yours and hers. She looked at Robert with undisguised disgust. You came into this court expecting to walk away from a 30-year marriage with minimal consequences. You treated your wife with contempt. You stole from her. You committed fraud against her, and you tried to use the legal system to further victimize her. I will not allow it. Not in my courtroom. Robert tried to speak, but nothing came out. Amber was openly crying now, probably realizing that the wealthy life she'd been counting on wasn't going to materialize. Furthermore, Judge Martinez said, I'm placing a lien on all your remaining assets until full restitution is made to Mrs. Harrison. If you attempt to transfer, hide, or dispose of any assets, you will be held in contempt of court and face jail time. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Robert managed. Good. This hearing is adjourned. She banged the gavel one final time. The courtroom erupted again, but this time it was my friends and family cheering. Emily and Michael hugged me, both of them crying. Susan was pumping her fist in the air. Patricia shook my hand with a huge smile. That, she said, was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I looked over at Robert, who was sitting at his table with his head in his hands. Amber had already left, probably realizing that her meal ticket had just evaporated. His lawyer was packing up papers with jerky, angry movements. Robert looked up and our eyes met one last time. There was no love there, no remnant of 30 years of marriage. There was just a broken man who'd gambled everything on a mistress and lost spectacularly. I felt nothing for him. No pity, no regret, no lingering affection. Just a cold satisfaction that justice had been served. The aftermath was swift and brutal for Robert. The district attorney did file criminal charges, 3 counts of fraud and 2 counts of identity theft. His law firm fired him immediately once they learned about his plans to steal clients. Amber left him within a week of the hearing, moving on to some other middle-aged mark with money. His reputation in the legal community was destroyed. He tried to sell his apartment to raise cash for my settlement, but because of the lien, he couldn't. He ended up having to move in with his brother in a 1-bedroom apartment across town. His brother's wife, Anne, whom one always gotten along with, called me to apologize for Robert and to tell me that she was making his life miserable.
He sleeps on the couch, she told me with satisfaction, and he has to do his own laundry and cook his own meals. Last night he burned pasta. I didn't know it was possible to burn pasta. The house was mine, fully paid off after we sold off some of Robert's assets to satisfy the settlement. I redecorated entirely, erasing every trace of him. New paint, new furniture, new everything. It felt like exorcising a ghost. Patricia helped me set up my financial accounts properly. With the settlement money, the house, and the alimony, I was actually quite comfortable. More comfortable than I'd ever been because I controlled everything now. No one could take it away from me. I also went back to school. At 59 years old, I enrolled in online classes to finish the degree I'd abandoned when I got pregnant with Emily. It felt incredible to be learning again, growing again, building something for myself. My children were amazing through everything.
Emily and David invited me to Seattle for a month-long visit where I got to spend precious time with my grandchildren. Michael and Sarah included me in their wedding planning. They'd postponed wedding during the divorce drama, but now they were moving forward, and they wanted me involved in every decision. Robert wasn't invited to the wedding. Michael was crystal clear about that. He made his choice when he chose Amber over all of us, Michael said. He doesn't get to pretend to be family now. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Robert at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen him since the hearing. He looked even worse, thinner, grayer, wearing a wrinkled shirt and jeans that hung on his frame. He was in the discount aisle, looking at generic brands. He saw me and froze. I was dressed nicely, having just come from lunch with friends. I had my hair styled, was wearing a new outfit, probably looked better than I had in years. The contrast between us was stark. "Margaret," he said quietly. "Robert." I kept my voice neutral, civil. "You look good." "Thank you." An awkward pause. Then, I wanted to apologize for everything. What I did was inexcusable. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the man I'd loved for 30 years. The man I'd built my life around. And I felt nothing. Maybe a little pity, but mostly nothing. I appreciate that. But an apology doesn't change anything. You made your choices, Robert. Now you're living with the consequences. I know, He looked down at his shopping basket with its generic coffee and store-brand cereal. I lost everything. The firm, Amber, my reputation. My brother's wife hates me. My kids won't talk to me. I'm broke. I'm facing criminal charges. And I'm sleeping on a couch at 58 years old. "Good," I said simply. He looked shocked, like he expected sympathy. But I had none to give. "You didn't just make a mistake, Robert. You spent months planning to betray me, to steal from me, to leave me with nothing. You didn't think about consequences then. You didn't think about our 30 years together, about our children, about me at all. You only thought about yourself and your secretary. So yes, you're paying for it now. And honestly, it's exactly what you deserve." I pushed my cart past him and walked away. I didn't look back. A year after the divorce, I was genuinely happy. Not just content, not just okay, but actually happy. I'd finished my degree, a bachelor's in English literature, something I'd always dreamed about. I'd joined several organizations, made new friends, started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women who were going through divorces. I traveled, Italy, Greece, New Zealand, all the places Robert and I had talked about but never gone to. Except now I went with friends, with Emily, with Michael and Sarah, and it was better than I'd ever imagined. Susan and I took a cruise to Alaska where we drank too much wine and laughed until our sides hurt. My book club expanded to include wine nights and pottery classes and weekend trips. I was busy, fulfilled, surrounded by people who actually valued me. I even started dating. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners with nice men I met through friends or online. It was terrifying at first, but also exciting. I was 60 years old and felt like I was discovering life all over again. One afternoon, I was having lunch with Patricia. We'd become friends over the course of the divorce, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Margaret, it's Robert." His voice was shaky, uncertain. I hadn't heard from him in months. "What do you want, Robert?" He, I was wondering if we could talk in person.
Why? Please, Margaret, just please. Something in his voice made me agree. We met at a coffee shop downtown.
neutral territory. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd aged years in the past 12 months. His hair was completely gray now, his face gaunt, his clothes shabby. He looked like a man who'd lost everything. Because he had. We sat across from each other, two strangers who'd once shared a life. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. "What do you want, Robert?" He took a deep breath. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not because of what it cost me, though that's been considerable, but because of what I did to you. You didn't deserve any of it. You were a good wife, a good mother, a good partner, and I threw it all away for something that wasn't even real. No, I agreed. I didn't deserve it. The criminal charges, my lawyer thinks I'll probably get probation, but I'll have a record. The firm partnership is gone, obviously. I'm working as a paralegal now, at a small firm in Riverside. It's all I could get. He laughed bitterly. I went from senior partner to paralegal. The guy I report to is 30 years old. "I'm sorry that your choices led you here," I said, meaning it. Not sorry for him, but sorry that he destroyed his own life so thoroughly. "I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance we could try again, start over? I've learned so much, Margaret. I know what I had, what I lost. I'd spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you just give me another chance." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I started to laugh. Really laugh, not bitter or angry, just genuinely amused at the absurdity of his request. "You'd think I'd take you back? After everything?" I shook my head. "Robert, I've spent the past year building a life that makes me happy, actually happy. I'm not going to give that up to nurse your ego and fix the mess you made." "But we were married for 30 years. And you destroyed that marriage," I interrupted, firmly. "You don't get to use our history as a reason for me to save you now. Those 30 years, they taught me that I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I don't need a man to define me or complete me, that I deserve better than someone who sees me as a convenience." "Margaret, please." "No." I stood up. "I hope you figure your life out, Robert. I hope you learn from this. But I'm done being your safety net. I'm done sacrificing for you. I have my own life now, and it doesn't include you." I left him sitting there, and this time I felt nothing but relief. No anger, no pain, no regret. Just freedom. That conversation was the last time I spoke to Robert. I heard through Michael that he eventually pleaded guilty to the fraud charges and got 2 years probation and community service. He was still working as a paralegal, last I heard, living in a studio apartment, alone. Amber had married some investment banker and moved to Connecticut. His brother finally kicked him out, tired of Anne's complaints, so he was truly on his own. I didn't gloat about it. I didn't even think about it much. He was simply irrelevant to my life now, a chapter that had closed. 2 years after the divorce, Emily had another baby, a little girl they named Margaret Rose, after me. When I held her for the first time, when I looked at my daughter's happy face and her loving husband beside her, I realized how much I'd gained by losing Robert. I was present for my children in ways I'd never been when I was consumed with managing Robert's life. I was building real relationships with my grandchildren, not just playing the role of grandmother. Michael and Sarah bought a house in Portland and begged me to visit often, which I did. Sarah told me once that she was grateful I was her mother-in-law instead of some of her friends' mothers-in-law who were bitter and controlling. "You're just happy," she said, "like genuinely happy. It's inspiring." I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Not because of revenge, though the justice had been satisfying. Not because Robert was suffering, though I didn't lose sleep over his circumstances, but because I discovered who I was without him. I'd spent 30 years being Robert's wife, Robert's support system, Robert's everything. And in doing so, I'd lost Margaret. But the divorce, as painful as it was, as devastating as that initial betrayal felt, had given me the chance to find myself again, to rebuild, to become someone I was proud of. I started teaching creative writing classes at the community center, sharing my love of literature with others. I published my first short story in a small literary magazine at 62 years old, something I dreamed of since I was young but never pursued. I joined a hiking group and climbed mountains I never would have attempted before. I said yes to opportunities and adventures that scared me because I'd learned that I was capable of surviving hard things.
The house that had once felt empty without Robert became my sanctuary. Every room reflected my taste, my choices, my life. The walls were painted in colors I loved, the furniture arranged the way I wanted, the art pieces things that spoke to me. My home office, where Robert's study used to be, was filled with my books, my diplomas, my writing projects. It was mine, completely and utterly mine. On what would have been our 33rd anniversary, Susan took me out to dinner. We went to an expensive restaurant, ordered champagne, and toasted to freedom, to friendship, to second chances. As we laughed over our appetizers, I caught a glimpse of someone across the restaurant who looked like Robert. My heart didn't even skip a beat. I just turned back to my friend and continued our conversation. That's when I knew I'd truly healed. When I could see him or someone who looked like him and feel nothing. No pain, no anger, no what-ifs, just nothing. He was part of my past, but he had no claim on my present or my future. My book club friends threw me a surprise 65th birthday party last month. They rented out a private room at a vineyard, invited my children and grandchildren, filled the space with flowers and laughter and love. Emily gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about how I'd shown her what real strength looked like. Michael stood up and said that watching me rebuild my life had taught him what resilience meant. My grandchildren made me cards and paintings. Susan presented me with a scrapbook filled with photos from our adventures over the past few years. Cruises and hikes and road trips and girls' weekends. As I looked around that room at all the people who loved me, who chose to be in my life, who valued me for who I was, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Not for the divorce, I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but for what came after, for the woman I'd become, for the life I'd built. I never thought at 58 years old that my life would fall apart, but I also never imagined that from those broken pieces, I'd build something so much better, something authentic and joyful and entirely my own. Robert took 30 years of my life, but he also gave me something unexpected, the chance to start over, to choose myself, to discover that I didn't need him to be happy, successful, or fulfilled. In trying to destroy me, he actually freed me. Last week, I got a message through Michael. Robert wanted to know if I'd be willing to meet with him again. Apparently, he's been going to therapy, working on himself, and wanted to make amends as part of his recovery process. Michael said it was up to me, that he'd support whatever I decided. I thought about it for about 30 seconds. Then I told Michael to tell him no, not out of anger or spite, but because I didn't owe Robert anything anymore. Not my time, not my emotional energy, not my forgiveness. If he needed to make amends for his own peace of mind, that was his journey, not mine. I'd already made my peace with what happened. I didn't need his apology to move forward. I'd already moved forward. Michael understood. Emily understood. They'd both healed in their own ways from their father's betrayal, had built their own boundaries with him. Emily let him video chat with the grandkids once a month, supervised. Michael sent him a card on Father's Day. They were kind but distant, giving him only what they felt comfortable giving. They'd learned from watching me that it was okay to put themselves first, to protect their own peace. I think that might be the greatest gift to come out of all this. Not just my own healing, but showing my children that it's never too late to choose yourself. That you don't have to accept mistreatment just because it comes from family. That forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the years I spent with Robert, if I feel like I wasted 30 years on someone who didn't deserve it. The answer is complicated. I regret how it ended. I regret that he chose to betray me, to steal from me, to throw away our marriage for a woman half his age. But I don't regret the years themselves because those years gave me Emily and Michael. Those years taught me things about myself, both good and bad. Those years were part of my story, even if they're not the ending. And what an ending I'm writing now. At 65, I'm healthier and happier than I was at 55. I'm taking ballroom dancing lessons, something Robert always refused to do, saying it was silly. I'm learning Italian because I'm planning a solo trip to Tuscany next spring. I'm writing a novel about a woman who discovers her strength after betrayal. Fiction, of course, but inspired by truth. I'm living a life that feels authentic and full and mine. I saw Robert's brother at the grocery store last month, the one I ran into 2 years ago, and he actually apologized to me. He said he was sorry for how his brother had treated me, sorry for not speaking up sooner when he saw Robert changing. He told me that Robert was still struggling, still working his paralegal job, still living alone. He asks about you sometimes, his brother said quietly. Wonders how you're doing.
I smiled. Tell him I'm doing wonderfully. And I was. I am. Every single day, I wake up and choose myself. I choose joy. I choose growth. I choose the life I'm building, brick by brick, on my own terms. Robert tried to leave me with nothing, tried to take everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to discover that I never needed him in the first place. The house I once shared with him is now a reflection of who I've become. Walls painted in shades of blue and lavender, bookshelves overflowing with novels and poetry, a sunroom where I write every morning, a garden where I grow vegetables and flowers. The bedroom is decorated exactly how I want it. The kitchen is stocked with foods I love, not foods Robert preferred. Every inch of this space is mine, and it feels like freedom. My calendar is full, but in the best way. Lunch dates with friends, visits from my grandchildren, writing workshops, hiking trips, volunteer shifts at the women's shelter where I counsel other women going through divorces. I tell them what I wish someone had told me. You are not defined by your marriage. You are not less valuable because someone chose to betray you. You are capable of surviving this and building something beautiful on the other side. Some of them don't believe me at first. They're too deep in their pain, too convinced that their lives are over. I understand that. I was there once too. But then I show them photos of my adventures, tell them stories of my new life, let them see the proof that happiness after devastation is not just possible, but probable if you're willing to do the work. The work isn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, days when I didn't want to get out of bed, moments when I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. But I did the work anyway. I went to therapy, I leaned on friends, I let myself feel the anger and grief and betrayal, and then I let it go. I chose to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for trusting someone who didn't deserve it, for giving so much of myself away. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I healed. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone I'm proud of, not because I got revenge, though that courtroom moment was satisfying, but because I survived, I rebuilt, I thrived.
I took the worst thing that had ever happened to me and used it as a catalyst for becoming the best version of myself. Robert is somewhere out there, living with his choices. I hope he's found some measure of peace, some understanding of the damage he caused. But honestly, whether he has or hasn't doesn't affect me anymore. He's a character in a story I've already finished writing. I'm on to new chapters now, new adventures, new dreams. My daughter Emily told me last week that she hopes she's as strong as I am when she faces hard times. My son Michael said I'm his hero. My grandchildren think I'm the coolest grandmother in the world because I take them on adventures and tell them they can be anything they want to be. My friends call me when they need advice or support because they know I understand what it means to rebuild from rubble. This is the woman I've become, not in spite of the betrayal, but because I refuse to let it define me. Robert tried to reduce me to a discarded wife, a victim, a cautionary tale. Instead, I became a survivor, a thriver, a woman who knows her worth and refuses to settle for less than she deserves. 3 years after the divorce, I ran into Amber at a charity event. She was there with her investment banker husband, dripping in diamonds, playing the role of trophy wife. She saw me and looked away quickly, embarrassed. I walked right up to her. "Hello, Amber," I said pleasantly. She looked terrified. "Margaret, hi, I, I wanted to thank you," I said, and I meant it. "Thank me?" She looked confused. "Yes, you did me a favor, actually. You took a man who'd become a stranger, who didn't value or respect me, and you removed him from my life. It hurt at the time, but looking back, you freed me to become who I was meant to be. So thank you."
She stared at me, speechless. I smiled, patted her arm, and walked away. I heard later from a mutual acquaintance that Amber's marriage was already showing cracks, that her husband was rumored to be cheating with his assistant. History repeating itself. I felt no satisfaction in that, just a distant sadness for a woman who seemed to measure her worth by her ability to attract wealthy men. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was living my best life, being present for the people I loved, and continuing to grow and evolve. At 65, I'm not done yet, not even close. I have books to write, places to visit, grandchildren to spoil, friends to laugh with, causes to support, and a life to live, my life, on my terms with no apologies. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm sitting in my sunroom with a cup of tea and a good book, I think about that moment in the courtroom when I pulled out those documents and watched Robert's face drain of color. I think about Judge Martinez's righteous anger, about the justice that was served, about how satisfying it was to win. But mostly, I think about what came after. The healing, the growth, the discovery of who Margaret truly was when she wasn't being Robert's wife. That's the real victory. Not the money, not the house, not even the public vindication in court. The real victory is that I like who I've become. I'm proud of the woman in the mirror. I enjoy my own company. I've built a life that brings me joy, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, doing things that matter to me. Robert took a lot from me, but he couldn't take this. My resiliency, my capacity for joy, my ability to start over. Those were always mine. I just didn't know it until I had to use them. In his betrayal, he inadvertently gave me the greatest gift, the chance to meet myself, really truly meet myself, and discover that I was enough, more than enough. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Harrison. I'm 65 years old. I was married for 30 years to a man who betrayed me, stole from me, and tried to discard me like I was worthless. He failed. I'm still here,
stronger and happier than ever, living proof that it's never too late to start over, to choose yourself, to build a life you love. If you've enjoyed my story, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to start over? Have you discovered strength you didn't know you had? Share your story. We're all in this together, learning and growing and supporting each other. And remember, you are never too old, never too broken, never too lost to rebuild. I'm living proof of that. Thank you for listening. And please don't forget to like and subscribe my YouTube channel because it takes hours of hard work, and yours it will take few seconds.